All right, shout out to the fam. Much love to FanDuel, the official sponsor of the show. Get y'all prop bets in at FanDuel and get some dough. Much love to you. Appreciate you. Hit the like button, the subscribe button. By all means, feel free to share the show on your social media feed. Big Q. We in this thing for another breakdown, man. Listen, let me tell y'all something, man. The Baltimore Ravens in week 2. We talked about week number 1's matchup against the Carolina Panthers. Kind of briefed you guys on some of the changes that Detroit did. Now it's Baltimore time. In week number 2, we go to Baltimore, take on a very tough Baltimore team who last year kind of had a little fall down, man. But this year they're looking to kind of bounce back into that thing. Remember, the team made some moves. They made some, after the failures of last year, Baltimore opted for some foundational changes. They completely altering the leadership hierarchy of the franchise. Owner Steve Biscotti and general manager Eric DeCosta made some monumental decisions. They fired longtime head coach John Harbaugh, who's now the coach of the Giants after almost 2 decades at the helm of the team, alongside offensive coordinator Todd Monken, he's the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, who we'll see later on in our schedule. And then the organizational message throughout there was the standard has slipped and the franchise demanded a brand new cultural identity. So a lot of changes that the Ravens made at the top. How would it impact them in week number 2? Now, we know we more than likely won't see the Baltimore's midseason form in week number 2, and perhaps not ours either. But it's like I said, when we're there just trying to be as crisp and make least amount of stakes as possibly can in our adversaries, and then ultimately attempt to come out with the victory against Baltimore in Baltimore. Going to be interested. But the Ravens, to give you some more backdrop on them, they pivoted into the future. They hired defensive mastermind Jesse Minter as their new head coach. Now, Minter brought with him structural changes, right? He keeping the 3-4 base defense, not modifying the alignments to kind of amplify the defensive flexibility in secondary, disguising coverages that he likes to use. Now, accompanying a mentor to Baltimore is Declan Doyle, who was brought in as the new offense coordinator, tasked with refining their passing attack, right? Keeping Lamar Jackson's lethal ground game intact. Now, we know about Doyle. Remember him. He has some Saints ties. Now, the front office also overhauled the roster with premium talent after a wild free agency sequence that occurred with a blockbuster trade. The whole thing with Max Crosby was just ridiculous. They rescinded the offer over physical evaluation concerns. Then they quickly redirected their assets to lock into on pass rusher Trey Hendrickson, giving him a 4-year deal worth $112 million. Trey been looking for his paper for a long time. He now gets it in Baltimore. So Hendrickson arrival gives the Ravens a good edge rusher to completely change how they pressure opposing quarterbacks. So Trey Hendrickson there is a big get for Baltimore on the defensive side of the ball. Then on the offensive line side, they underwent some changes as well. They lost Tyler Linderbaum and Daniel Falele in free agency. The Ravens then targeted those deficiencies in the first round of the draft, getting Penn State guard Vega Ione with the 14th overall pick to lock down the interior. They also signed veterans Javon Gwynn, John Simpson, and Danny Pinter to build competitive depth along the offensive line. And of course, the Baltimore Ravens then transferred its offensive perimeter by parting ways with Isaiah Likely. He was gone, and then trading for Durham Smythe. So DeCosta then stacked 2 wide receivers room by utilizing consecutive mid-round picks, highly touted wide receivers Jacoby Lane from USC and Elijah Surratt, who is a wide receiver from Indiana, the national championships, that gives Lamar Jackson some help there, and alongside of Zay Flowers. So getting Jacoby Lane and Elijah Surratt, physical wide receivers, fast wide receivers, big wide receivers to go along with a speedster, and Zay Flowers should be interesting. So we do know that the regular season record, they were 8-9. They finished second in the AFC North. They were 11th in the NFL in terms of offensive ranking, 424 points per game. They averaged almost 25 points a game. 424 points for 25, almost 25 points per game. Pardon me. Defensive ranking, they were 18th in the NFL. They allowed almost 400 yards a game, or 400, excuse me, not 400 yards a game. 398 points were allowed, right? So they're eighth in terms of the ranking. They allowed almost 400 points, that season, which was a 23.4 point average. So they scored 25 and gave up 23.4. Now they missed the playoffs. That's the first time since 2021, and that's what caused the big shift. Now the Ravens season collapsed early due to the defense and a disastrous 1-5 start. Now Derrick Henry dominated. He had almost 1,600 rushing yards. He propelled the team to the NFL's second best rushing attack, which was 156.6 yards per game, with quarterback Lamar Jackson working with running back Derrick Henry. Lamar threw for over 2,500 yards, but the inability of the defense to lock down teams in the close games cost John Harbaugh his job and sparked the reset. The Ravens didn't make the playoffs, which really pissed off the ownership, and it just made them want to clear out everything, and that's exactly what they did, bringing in a new leadership here to the team. Now, we'll see how it all goes, because we know Detroit as well as Baltimore coming into this side of things are going to present a hell of a challenge for the Saints to be able to deal with going forward. And that's the thing, like being able to deal with the running attack. Once again, we talked about week's number one matchups, right, with Jeremiah Gibbs, what he was able to do from a rushing standpoint, adding Pacheco there as a 1-2 combo. Derrick Henry is still, he's a little older, long in the tooth, but he still has good, he could still be able to provide some rushing attack. They kind of overused him last year. He had over 300 rushes. That was fourth in the NFL, second in rushing yards. He had 16 rushing touchdowns. That was second in the NFL. He averaged 5.2 yards per carry. That was third in the NFL. Will that keep going will be yet to be determined. But the bottom line is the offense all moved through Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Now, they still have Justice Hill and others that they can combo Derrick Henry with to slow things down. But adding Zay Flowers with Jacoby Lane, Elijah Surratt, they still have Rashad Bateman, Devontae Walker. Is supposed to be, it's a good mix of talent right there to kind of give that offense more kick, per se, and trying to improve that offensive line to keep things going, to protect Lamar Jackson and keep running the football while giving him weapons upfield. The issue is the defense. Now, Mentor is the guy on defense. He did add some pieces on defense. Getting Trey Hendrickson was big. You still have Roquan Smith there. You still have several other really talented players like Kyle Hamilton and Malachi Starks, Marlon Humphrey. All of those guys are tremendous players for the team, and they'll be heavily relied upon. But make no bones about it, the team still flows through Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Now, they did, like I said, Zay Flowers had a really solid year last year, and they will be kind of counting on this type of production to keep going. We know Mark Andrews, the big tight end, it was a help. Isaiah Likely also helped out. Bateman last year, not producing as much as they want to produce. That's why they added these other wide receivers to come in and kind of help jumpstart that offense. And Roquan Smith was 130 plus tackles last year. Kyle Hamilton had over 100 tackles as a safety. No interceptions this way, but they do have a very interesting defense that needs to improve. So will they be able to do that? Yet to be determined. But I know is that if the Baltimore Ravens come to town, they're going to try to run that football. I mean, if we're going up there, they're going to try to run that football right down your throat. So the Saints defense will have to deal with stopping that. So that's what we kind of flash on to this card right here. So you can see for yourself, this is totals from last year's defense, just to show what we are looking at and trying to change. The defense overall allowed 383 points for the season, 16th in the NFL. Total yards allowed, total yards allowed, period. Outside of the points, over 5,000 yards per contest. I mean, for this entire season, which was ninth. Yards per play, 4.8, which was sixth. And you see 10th with the sacks. They were sack yards, which was 290, which is 22nd. They're adding that in there as well. And of course, you look at the strengths of the Saints defense last year, right? The pass defense was on point. Fifth, the fifth in the NFL with pass yards allowed. They were fourth in pass attempts allowed, and they were 13 in terms of pass averages allowed, almost seven per contest. Well, where were the Saints weak at? And this is when you know Kellen Moore's paying attention to his team. He's paying attention. The Saints allowed over 2,000 rushing yards last year. That was 30th in the NFL. That has to change. That's why the Saints drafted Christian Miller out of the University of Georgia to work with Brian Bresee and Vernon Brockton to stop this running. To stop this, shut all this shit down for running on the Saints. But you look at the rush yards allowed, right? Allowed there was 6, and the rush attempts allowed was 19. But the rush yards allowed was a lot of gashing that happened early in the first half of the season where the Saints just couldn't get it under control. So they really delegated resources there to fix that with Christian Miller and Brian Bresee. That'll be the future there. So the Saints will have to kind of turn all of that around. So you can see that. So you can see the points versus the NFL average, and that says minus 31 right there versus the Saints. So you can see the yards allowed average breakdown for the black and gold. In terms of the pass versus the rush, showing you it needs to change. So the focus is stop the run and finish the drives is what we're looking at from the defensive standpoint. For the offensive standpoint for the black and gold, it's quite simple. You can see that there's room for improvement. Offense overall, 306 points right there, 28, 5,331 yards, which was 23rd, and they averaged 5 yards per throw, which is 27. That has to change. You see, the running the game was a major issue. That was the red flags. 1,600 yards rushing, that was 23rd. The rush average was 31st, which was really 3.7, which is really concerning. And then you see the rush attempts were 28th in the NFL. That was a major point of problems, and that the Saints really recognized and seen the problems there and had to change it. The running game alert was bad. They have to change that. So you can see the passing attack over 4,000, ranked 10th. The passing attempts right there, 491, which was 6th. The average pass was almost 7 yards per pass, which was 18th, which can improve. But this stat is obviously showing you where the Saints need to improve upon in terms of the offense. They allowed 49 sacks, which is 29th in the NFL. That has to change. And they only got 319 first downs, which is 17. So the moral of the story is protection and run game hurting deficiency. We got to be able to kind of change this thing around, and passing top 10, run game holding them back. So we have to be able to flip the narrative where the Saints were throwing the ball and getting vertical. And a lot of that is because Kellen Moore wanted to figure out which one that the Saints do best. He was doing a lot of east-west stuff. People was figuring out the offense didn't have any imagination. And then he started getting vertical. Tyler Shough came in the game. They started attacking downfield, and they kind of flipped things. Things made things more exciting. And then the defense came online. Guys started figuring out what they needed to do, and it kind of changed. Does that momentum, you thinking that momentum flow from last year into this season? Now there's new pieces that you have to add, and there's a brief reset in terms of that. But what you see guys like Tyler Shough doing in the offseason, like going and throwing and catching the ball with wide receivers, they already get the rhythm and the timing. Like, okay, most of that is solved when those guys out there practicing on their own and throwing the football and catching the ball, working on rhythm, timing, which wide receiver, where he wants the ball. All that makes it a faster transition when the quarterback is already familiar with where the wide receiver wants the football to be. Here, put the ball here, put it there, knowing where he can do that. That is key, because that speeds up the process and makes practices a lot easier if you're committing to that outside of just going to camp and figuring that out. They're already doing that stuff outside of camp, outside of the mandatory. They're doing that on their own. They're spending their own money and their own time doing that to try to expedite the process, which is great. Yes, that's terrific. But nonetheless, like I said, that's some of the stuff that has to change from our perspective going forward, because you're going to need the running attack, because they're going to bring Derrick Henry, who's a little up in the two, but he was still phenomenal last year. They're not going to lay off that. They didn't really bring in another back to take it from him. They're going to make Derrick Henry the featured back, or give him Justice Hill and other guys to kind of compete with there. I think so. We're gonna see how it flow. But Lamar Jackson is still a force and a weapon, even though he played in 13 games last year. Remember, he missed a lot of games when he played in 13 last year. He still, as a running back, had 349 yards rushing. He averaged 5 yards a rush and had 2 rushing touchdowns on top of the 2,500 plus yards and 21 touchdowns that he threw. So he's a part of the running attack, along with him and Derrick Henry, and doing that. So in order to have success, you have to watch out for those two, number one. And having Jesse Mentor, he's a defensive minded guy. He'll be scheming up ways to get Trey Hendrickson loose in that defense. So that's going to also be very telling to see how this all flows and works. But they have a lot of good pieces on their side. They added Zion Young there as well. They got a few other pieces there. Calais Campbell came and is now there as well to help out with them. And you never can tell with these guys, with the Baltimore Ravens, and what they can do and what they're trying to do. But the Saints have to be ready in week number 2 going to Baltimore. Let me show you guys their depth chart before we get a skedaddle. Here it is right here. It's the Baltimore depth chart as of right now. Not expecting them to do any more like major moves to try to terraform the team, because what you see right here is pretty much what they're going to go into the season with. So like I said, with your Lamar Jackson, we talked about him, what he did last year in the few games that he played due to injury. And then, of course, Derrick Henry had a really big year in terms of what he was able to put together at the age of 32 years old, still tearing up the lead, almost 1,600 yards rushing. He was second in the NFL in rushing last year. And the 2 years that he's been with Baltimore, man, he is just, when they giving him the carries, he just tears it up. He has 16 rushing touchdowns in each of the last 2 years. You think they're going to go away from that? They're going to continue to use that. And of course, their wide receivers, they found a feature one in Zay Flowers, who really been stepping his game up. Zay Flowers has really been a big piece of what they're doing. He had his best year last year, 86 catches, over 1,200 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's been phenomenal. He's the feature piece and the speed demon of the offense, and he's talented. And then the next thing is, we knew guys like Rashad Bateman, a lot of them who took, that are losing faith in Rashad Bateman. He's been inconsistent, only 19 catches last year. So the team kind of under new management decided they didn't get rid of the guy, but they decided to bring on somebody to challenge him. That's guys like Elijah Surratt, the fantastic possession wide receiver that catches everything from Indiana. He won a championship. Now he's a Baltimore Raven here. And then Jacoby Lane, another tall wide receiver. These are big wide receivers. Jacoby Lane has a degree of speed. He's 6'4", 200 pounds with third round application. So they have big wide receivers that can press Rashad Bateman for the job and try to see if they can move him out of the way and kind of supplant him and get guys in there that can complement Zay Flowers. That's what it's about. Mark Andrews there, they kind of fixed up on the line with Staley and did what they got to do on that side of it. They still there, but the defense, we'll see what they got going. Calais Campbell comes back. He comes to town to add more defensive help from the team. We know that they did pick up Trey Hendrickson, who is going to step in to see what he can do. Last year, only 4 sacks for Trey Hendrickson, had an off year dealing with injury. But the 2 prior years, 2 17.5 sack years, he got his paper. No more excuses, Trey. He got his paper with Baltimore. He's happy. And, of course, the secondary, Kyle Hamilton, Marlon Humphrey, 2 really solid players. Roquan Smith has been big for him as well. You got Ted Buchanan was another big player linebacker for him that has eye application. So they have some pieces, and they still play gritty football in the city of Baltimore. And it's just what we have to do as the Saints is step in there and kind of handle the business against this team and take possession and control of this thing. So this is what it looks like, family, against the week number 2 matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. Like I said, the first 2 matchups will test the Saints run the running line. They're going to test the interior of the defensive line, right? We'll see how that looks in those first two matchups. The second matchup will test the Saints' edge and the athleticism, because Lamar Jackson likes to scramble and move around and throw on the run. So that will test that Achilles heel and test the Saints early to see what they can do against two teams that like to run the football, and they do it well. So that's what I got. But what do you got? Y'all put it in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think about the Baltimore Ravens. Jesse Mentor, what do you think he brings to the organization? Moving forward, Baltimore did a lot of changes here. Will it work in their favor? A lot of people anticipating Baltimore to make a step to get back to the playoffs this year. We shall see. Saints also thinking that too. Made a lot of changes to get into the playoffs in the NFC South. We'll see how that goes. But nonetheless, shout out to FanDuel, the official sponsor of this show. Go to FanDuel for all your prop bets and get your hustle on, get your betting on over there at FanDuel. Also hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. By all means, feel free to share the show on social media feed. Big Q representing the Who Dat Nation. I'm rocking with y'all, man, on this one. And y'all give me y'all thoughts and on this week 2 matchup, this early peak at week number 2 in the Saints schedule. Man, it's a lot of interesting games on the road against Detroit, on Baltimore, and then the next breakdown will be the Saints' first home game coming up against the Las Vegas Raiders and Clint Kubiak. That should be interesting to see as well, right, fam? So with that being said, I'm going to holler at y'all on the next one. Much love, peace, and who that to you.
Who that say they gonna beat them Saints? Who that? Who that? Who that say they gonna beat them Saints? Who that? Who that? Who that say they gonna beat them Saints? Who that?
Hey, New Orleans! Whether you're catching up on Saints news at Jackson Square, checking Pelicans scores in the Garden District, or staying updated on LSU while grabbing coffee in the French Quarter, there's one place that keeps you connected to everything that matters in our city. From Bourbon Street to the Superdome, from Preservation Hall to the Riverfront, New Orleanians are staying in the know with thewhodatdaily.com. Your daily source for Saints, Pelicans, LSU, and all the sports, music, and culture that makes our city special. At work downtown, at a game in the Dome, or just relaxing by the Mississippi, wherever life takes you in the Big Easy, you can stay connected. Because when you're from New Orleans, you don't just live here. You stay in the NO. That's stay in the know. Visit thewhodatdaily.com and never miss what matters most to Who Dat Nation.
Welcome to the Pro Shop, where we create authentic, NOLA-inspired clothing for men, women, and children. From Saints jerseys to Pelicans gear, everything's crafted right here in New Orleans. Whether you're shopping the Pro Shop, the Pel Shop, or the Pro Shop Kids, we've got your whole family covered with genuine merchandise that represents our city's spirit. Check for links in the description section below or in the chat.